Okay, guys, I'm going to give you the next assignment, which is continuing with the disease tracker, but adding a component where we can save information long term. And so we're going to go through this lesson together, and then you guys will have from today, Tuesday, when you get this, until Thursday to complete this. So you can spread it out as many days as it takes you. You can do a little bit each day. You can do all of it in one day and then not have to worry about my class for the other 2 days. But I'm going to give you these 3 days to work on this project. So 2.4, persistent data. Persistent data is what they call big data. And basically, this just means anything that is permanently saved on your device. So some ways that data is used in this case would be anytime that you maybe have to log into some sort of gaming app or a game on your Xbox, and you have to enter user information, and then the next time that you turn your Xbox on, it remembers your user information. So it says, "Hi, so and so, welcome back," or whatever, and it remembers what level you're on, the level, however many levels you've completed throughout the game. All of that is stored long-term, persistent data, right? Right now, currently, the way that our disease tracker app is working is if I turn off the exit out of the app and then I get back into it, it doesn't remember the information that I've entered. It doesn't remember that in January I entered 10 patients were seen, and in February I entered that 15 patients were seen. If I turn the app off and I get back in, the data list is empty. And we want this to be stored long term, right? So if the user enters their information in January, they get out of the app and they get back into it in February, we want to remember what we stored in January, right? So that's what this is using. And we use what's called the TinyDB to do that. That's the component in the view layer that you're going to find. And so the information that we're going to be storing is the clinic information. So we want to store the clinic name, we want to store the clinic address, the clinic phone number, and then when the user clicks Save Data, all of that information will be saved into the TinyDB component so that when the app is closed and we get back into it again, that information is still there. So this is what we want our new screen to look like. I have given you, even though you worked with a partner at school and you're going to be doing this part on your own, you won't have to create the disease tracker again. I'm going to give you everything that everybody did together at school right now. Okay, so I'm going to give you the working disease tracker like we finished it at school, and then you will just have to add this. And I'm going to give it to you as a download in this assignment in Google Classroom. Okay. So going through this lesson, again, storing information kind of acts like a database. So when you want to permanently save information into the device's memory, it kind of acts like a table here. And so we have a tag, and that's like if I want to store the user's name, then for tag, I might put name, and the value would be whatever my name is, whatever the user enters. Okay, so the tag, sometimes referred to as the key, the value is the actual data element. Okay, the tag is like the description. So for example, if you want to create a database that stores the client's name and date of birth, one tag would be name, and the value would be the client's name. Another tag would be date of birth, the value would be the client's date of birth. Okay. An app inventor, that component is called the TinyDB. So these are the information. This is the information that we want to store. Okay, we want to store the clinic's name, we want to store the clinic's address, the clinic's phone number, and we want to store any information that we entered previously. So I want to store January if that's what I'm doing now, so that when I get back into it in February, January information is still there. Okay. Why do you think that storing the sum and the average don't need to be stored persistently? Okay, we were talking about storing data. Why don't we need to store the sum and the average? So to save space in their database, we only have so much storage on our devices. Programmers usually avoid storing values that can be calculated during runtime. So while the user is using the app, it's easier just to hit show data and have it recalculate the information that's already in our list rather than storing that information. So then it goes through giving you directions for where to find the TinyDB component, pulling it in. Remember that the layer that the TinyDB is using is actually we have 3 layers. Remember the view layer, what the user sees, the control layer, which has the code in it, and then the model layer, which has our data, our stored information. So the TinyDB uses the model layer to store the data that we want to collect. So then continue following through with these instructions. When I click the Save Data button, that's when I want to call the TinyDB to store the information for, this is going to be the clinic name, the clinic address, the clinic phone number, and then any information in the months and amounts that we have already entered. Okay, so you're going to make sure that you're using call store value tag and the value that's going to be stored. Remember we said tag and value. Tag is what is that, okay, and value is where the information, what is the clinic's address. This needs to be spelled correctly, camel case. When we call it to show us the information that has been stored, we need to make sure that what you're typing matches what you're calling to show. Okay, so we need to make sure that we spell this correctly both places, and we're going to see the other place that we're going to use it here in just a second. Okay, so we've called it to store the values that were entered. So the user, they enter their information, they're going to click Save Data. That's going to save long-term into our TinyDB, right? This is storing lists of values. So storing the list of months and the list of entry amounts, okay? So that's where we get our list. Make sure that you're clicking List to CSV row. Okay, that's converting your values to a list, and it's called a string. So you're going to tag it as entry months. You're going to get that list, save it into a string of values that are separated by a comma for months and amounts. All right, continuing on. Now we also want to say, yes, it was saved successfully. Okay, so that's the last thing you're going to add. Check it, okay, to make sure you don't get an error message. Now we want to display it. So we want to call it to get that information from our list and put it back into the screen where the user can see what information they've saved. All right, so when the screen is initialized, we want that clinic name to show up. So we want to call it back from the TinyDB where we've stored it to the text. So I want to set the text box text to that value that was in the TinyDB. Okay, so this explains how to get it from the list back to the text box. As for the lists, they require a bit more work to display the data automatically when the screen is initialized. So we want to get the value from the list that's in our database, convert the value from the CSV row to the list structure, okay, using list from CSV row and set them to the entry months and entry amounts back to the list values, right, the variables. So this is where we're going to go back and, okay, So we want to also not only call the clinic name, address, and phone number from our stored information to our screen, right? So we want to get it from the TinyDB and put it back into the text box so the user can see that information. But we also want to do that with any entry months or amounts that have been previously entered. So we want to set our current global variable to any information from the TinyDB that was already entered previously. So I want to set the global entry months to a list from the CSV row. Make sure that you choose the correct wording when you're looking for this block in the list drawer. There's a from and a to, I think, in that drawer. So just make sure you're getting list from CSV row. You want to call the TinyDB, that's anything that is stored as an entry months tag, okay, back to our entry months list variable. All right, and then display a sum, an average, and a data list so we can see the information that has already been entered. All right, and then test your app. Make sure to test it for these things. We have a media challenge. So if the physician wanted to take a picture or a video of the clinic and display the picture or video, what would that look like? How would we do that? We want to add a camera component to your app, allow it to take a picture and store that in the database. Make sure the stored picture is retrieved and displayed on the screen along with the other data that you have stored in the TinyDB, or complete any optional housekeeping challenges, which are if there's no data to retrieve, meaning if the list is empty, for the list from the database. So you might see this, what can you do to prevent that error message from displaying? The clear data button doesn't clear the new text boxes. What can you do to fix that? And if you did not complete that, your app will have fixed those things. No, I don't think I added that to that. Where we fix that clear button, I'll look at that. I'll make sure those are fixed for you. So you can do one or two of these optional housekeeping activities as well. And then you can, in App Inventor, go to My Projects and click Export Selected Project to My Computer. All right. When I tried these on your Chromebooks at school, it didn't want to do this, but when I just did it from my house, it did. So it could be the school's Wi-Fi just didn't allow this, but export it to your computer, and then in your drive, under shared drives, I've invited all of you to this PLTW2 apps. So if you open that, there we go. Then you can click new, do a file upload, and depending on where you saved it, like, yeah, see, I just downloaded the disease tracker for you so I could put it in Google Classroom so it's there. So I could take this from my downloads or wherever you might have it on your computer, and then it will add it to this folder. All of us have access to this, so what I would like for you to do is make sure you name your file your name so you can share your work with me this way. And I think that's all for today.